अगोला राष्ट्रीय गान।
अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा, विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा। तब शुभ नामे जागे, तब शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तब जय गाथा। जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
Respected Rashtrapati Ji, Dr. Manmohan Singh Ji, Dr. Karan Singh, distinguished guests, I am glad to welcome you, Rashtrapati Ji, and all of you to this lecture which marks a very special event, the 125th birth anniversary of Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of independent India and the maker of India's modern nationhood. The structures of government and economy, the very ethos and principles which shaped modern India would have been very different had it not been for his vision, his leadership, his tremendous commitment and hard work during our country's formative years. Jawaharlal Nehru was preeminent amongst those remarkable men and women who inspired and led by Mahatma Gandhi freed India from colonial domination. Nehru assumed office at the most traumatic time when the horrors of partition were unfolding and when the country lost Mahatma Gandhi. He steered India through this most turbulent period and placed it firmly on the path of parliamentary democracy and planned development. This is what gave rise to the Nehruvian consensus that has stood us well this past 6 decades and more. Our achievements would not have been possible without the solid foundations established under his leadership. The fact that we are a parliamentary democracy anchored in liberal values, the fact that we celebrate our many diversities, the fact that we are strong internationalists, the fact that we see social equality and empowerment as absolutely essential aspects of economic development. All of these are largely Jawaharlal Nehru's legacy. Given his towering stature, intellectually and politically, we often tend to think that he governed unchallenged. Not so. His 17 years as Prime Minister were a time when there were sharp ideological differences and even passionate policy disagreements, a time when the course he charted for a newly independent country was often called into question. Yet, he reached across the political spectrum to exchange views and ideas with critics on major issues of the day, never shying away from engaging with his detractors. Jawaharlal Nehru's most bitter antagonists acknowledged that he was free from malice, from mean-mindedness, from parochial instincts, and above all, from hate and fear. The legacy of every political leader is often subject to revisionism of some type or other, but what is being attempted on Jawaharlal Nehru by those who are ideologically hostile to him is the total rejection of his secular vision of a tolerant and liberal India celebrating its many diversities. Those who castigate him choose also to be oblivious of the larger political and historical context of his times, in which the state had to be the principal catalyst for socio-economic transformation. The idea of India, for which he stood and always upheld, is an idea we must continue to fiercely fight for. And if I might add, so is the idea of Nehru as well, an idea that belongs not to one political party alone or narrow segment, but indeed to the entire country and humanity at large. Today, on this momentous anniversary, we are privileged to have the President of India with us to deliver the Nehru Memorial Lecture. President Mukherjee spent over half a century in active politics before occupying Rashtrapati Bhavan. He is one of the few leaders who served in high cabinet posts under all Congress prime ministers since Indira Gandhi, in whose cabinet, youngest finance minister this country has had. Politics apart, he has been among the most thoughtful and well-read personalities in public life. His breadth and depth of understanding of the cross currents of Indian society and politics and of the world is perhaps unmatched. A man of politics, a man of letters, a man of wisdom and experience, we could think of no most appropriate personality to deliver this year's lecture. I now invite the President of India to deliver his address. Thank you.
Good evening, Srimati Sonia Gandhi, Chairperson, Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund, Dr. Manmohan Singh, former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Karan Singh, Vice Chairman, Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund, distinguished members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to deliver the 46th Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Lecture being organized on the occasion of the 125th birth anniversary of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. I am grateful to Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, Chairperson of the Trustees of the Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund, for this invitation. It is not easy to do justice to Jawaharlal Nehru's remarkable life as well as his contributions to the making of modern India in a short span of a lecture. I shall, however, strive today to briefly cover some of his views, actions, and the legacy he left behind. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in May of this year, India saw a peaceful transfer of power from one political formation to another for the 8th time since 1952. On September 24, 2014, the Mars mission, launched by the Indian Space Research Organization, entered the orbit of the red planet. In 2008, India and United States concluded a civil nuclear agreement which recognized India as a state with advanced nuclear technologies and brought India into the international nuclear mainstream. What I have just stated now are three important but different moments in India's recent history, but a common thread which runs through them, and what they dramatically illustrate is how Nehru's legacy is not just intact but continues to lead from modern day India to new heights of achievement. Nehru's service to India are immeasurable. He was one of the greatest figures in our time. Nehru had a clear vision of what modern India should look like, and he set out to realize his dreams by establishing strong pillars which would support the young nation. If India is a vibrant democracy today, it is because of the foundations laid by Nehru. If India has become the third largest economy in the world in terms of purchasing power parity, it is because of the multi-purpose projects, public sector undertakings, and the institutions of higher learning established by Nehru, as well as the systematic planning process initiated by him. If India today is counted amongst the technologically advanced nations of the world, it is because of Nehru's promotion of scientific temper and the chain of scientific research laboratories that he built across the country. It is Nehru who brought us from a backward and dependent economy to the emerging power we are today. It is he who has equipped Indians with the confidence and ability to ensure that our country obtains its rightful and honored place amongst the leading nations of the world. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Jawaharlal Nehru's contribution to the freedom movement was unique. The end of the First World War saw the unraveling of the major empire ruled by the Kaisers, Caliphs, and the Tsar. In India in 1917 saw the Home Rule movement commence under leadership of Dr. Annie Besant. Jawaharlal Nehru, still in his early 20s, began his political career as one of the joint secretaries of the Home Rule League in Uttar Pradesh with his father Motilal Nehru as president. Jawaharlal Nehru then plunged into the non-cooperation movement launched by Mahatma Gandhi and went to jail in December 1921. Thereafter, Nehru continued to be in the front ranks of the freedom movement. He became the Congress president at the age of 40 in the Lahore Congress of 1929. The transfer of baton from the father Motilal Nehru, who presided over the Congress session at Calcutta in 1928, was not just symbolic. It truly meant a transfer of leadership of the Congress to the younger generation. The Lahore Congress declared Purn Swaraj as its goal and authorized to launch the civil disobedience movement. Nehru then went on to become president of the Congress in the Lucknow session of 1936, Firozpur session in 1937, and many more times later. Long before the freedom from the foreign rule became a reality, Jawaharlal Nehru, as president of the Indian National Congress, declared in 1936 that India's ultimate objective was establishment of a democratic state full democracy, and a new social and economic order. Nehru also popularized the demand of a constituent assembly to draft India's own constitution and made it a central issue in the 1937 provincial assembly elections. Nehru lost a total of 3,262 days in jail during the freedom struggle, with 1,040 days during the 1942 Quit India movement as the longest spell. It is during this period Nehru penned the 1,200-page manuscript of the discovery of India while under arrest in Ahmednagar Fort. It was written in flowing hand using rationed wartime paper with no cut, blemish or correction. Nehru was prodigiously productive in terms of writing and thinking during his different periods in jail, as is well known. Glimpses of world history was written by him in 1934, based on 196 letters written to his young daughter Indira from various prisons. He covered in these letters the entire history of humankind from 6000 BC to the time of writing these letters, using only his personal notes and without any reference books. Nehru's intense passion for India's freedom can be seen from his observations in April 1942. Before the Cripps mission came, he stated, "We want much. Our appetite for freedom is insatiable. We are hungry for it, and our throats are parched with thirst." The establishment of full parliamentary democracy in India was a momentous step in the history of decolonization. Nehru played a central role in shaping the process by which limited representative governments given by the British in progressive doses was transformed into a vibrant and powerful institutions that suited the genius of the Indian people. Democracy for Nehru meant a responsible and responsive political system governing through consultation and discussions. There was in him what his biography S. Gopal calls, I quote, a granite core of intellectual and moral commitment to democratic values. Moving the objective resolution of in the Constituent Assembly, Nehru observed, I quote, "Whatever system of government we may establish here must fit in with the temper of our people and be acceptable to them," unquote. Nehru established healthy practices and precedents as leader of the House in Provisional Parliament of 1950, first, second and third Lok Sabhas from 1952 to 1964. He treated Parliament with great respect and sat patiently through long and often tedious debates as an example to his colleagues and young parliamentarians. He spoke frequently in Parliament and used it as a forum to disseminate his views to the public. Letters from members of the Parliament were invariably replied to personally and promptly. Nehru laid down conventions of lasting value by upholding the Speaker's position in the House. Nehru promoted frank discussions on subjects of importance in the House of Parliament and did not appreciate the use of public interest as a reason to deny information. Nehru was aware that the lack of an established opposition meant significant weakness in the Indian system. That's why he observed, I quote, "I do not want India to be a country in which millions of people say yes to one man. I want a strong opposition," unquote. Most of the time of Parliament session during the first to third Lok Sabha were devoted to discussing legislation, budget, plan and matters related to money and finance. The volume of financial transaction in those days was very meager. Even Jawaharlal Nehru once jokingly commented that the budget of the federal government of India is less than that the budget of New York Municipal Corporation, but this did not prevent members of parliament from having full debate on various financial issues, especially the 5-year plans. Nehru frequently met opposition leaders to exchange ideas and crucial issues and asked his ministers to welcome probing questions and debates. Even though there was no formal opposition party, Nehru had highest respect to the opposition leaders like Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee, Professor Hiren Mukherjee, H.V. Kamat, A.K. Gopalan, Sri Ashok Mehta, all of whom are members in the first Lok Sabha, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was elected to the second Lok Sabha, and Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, who became the member of the third Lok Sabha, received special attention from Nehru. Nehru took keen interest in the question hour and was almost always present during the hour. Nehru was attentive to the need to preserve and protect the rights and privileges of the members. He was also particular that the dignity and prestige of the House should be maintained at all times. Nehru had tremendous faith in the capacity of poor, unlettered people of India to understand issues and exercise reasoned choices. He did not use the excuse of the partition of the country, consequent communal violence, or influx of refugees to postpone the first general election. On the contrary, he was impatient to go to the people and unhappy that elections could not be held earlier. In the campaign of the first general election of 1951-52, Nehru personally travelled some 25,000 miles and addressed around 35 million people, or a tenth of India's then population. He educated the people about the value of adult suffrage and their duty to discharge their right to vote with responsibility. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Nehru was secular to the core. When the French writer André Mollet asked Nehru late in the life what had been his most difficult task, he replied, I quote, "Creating a just state by just means, I think." And after a brief pause, perhaps creating a secular state in a religious country, especially when its religion is not founded on an inspired book, unquote. It was because of Nehru's consistent efforts that India established itself as a secular state with equal rights for all, regardless of their religious affiliation. Nehru was keen that women play their part as equal citizens of the nation. Unlike in the West, women in India got the right to vote at the same time as men, a goal spelled out by the Congress as early as 1928. In another speech at Kolani in 1954, Jawaharlal Nehru observed, women of India must play an adequate role in the building of the country. Without them, the country cannot make rapid progress. The state of progress of the country can be known by the conditions of the women because they are the makers of the people of the country, unquote. The aftermath of the Second World War saw the globe split between the rival power blocks of East and West. For India, more so for Nehru, who as Prime Minister held the portfolio of foreign affairs for 17 long years, staying out of military blocs and alliances was essential to maintaining freedom of action for the nascent Indian state. Nehru refused to accept the assistance under Marshall Plan so as not to compromise India's independence in foreign policy. Nehru's policy of non-alignment did not mean equidistance or isolation. It meant independence of judgment and action. It was not a passive, but a proactive and dynamic policy in which India was strongly committed to the goals of the United Nations and would do its best for peace in the world. Nehru did not wish to involve India in the conflict which the great powers were waging or become a camp follower of any group. As early as 1946, India moved a resolution in the United Nations General Assembly condemning the racial discrimination in South Africa. India sent troops for peace, keeping to the Gaza Strip and Congo. India was a tireless campaigner against nuclear weapons and testing in the ocean and atmosphere. It played an important role in the conclusion of partial nuclear test ban treaty in 1963. Today, when the Cold War has passed into history book, it should be kept in mind that Nehru's foreign policy was rooted in the sound, consistent principle of India first. India emerged from colonial rule, a mostly agrarian country. Agriculture had been virtually stagnant for half a century, and the average rate of economic growth was less than 1%. Against this dismal backdrop, the first 15 years saw an estimated GDP growth of 4% and nearly 2% per capita, as opposed to 0.1% in the years from 1940 to 47. This was a historic turning point, and India was on par with best performing economies of its time, ahead of China, UK and Japan. Congress President Subhash Chandra Bose in 1938 set up the National Planning Committee with Jawaharlal Nehru as its chairman. Jawaharlal Nehru included in it not just politicians, but scientists, economists, businessmen and industrialists. Planning was seen by Nehru as a vast national endeavor and not just the task of Planning Commission. The well-known economist Professor P.C. Mahalanobis described the Nehruvian approach to the planning as the middle way or the middle path. The mixed economy, the welfare state emerged thereafter as important concepts. The setting up of the Planning Commission, the emergence of the public sector, land reforms, regulations on industrial monopoly, state trading were all the results of the Nehru's multifaceted initiatives. Nehru also devised the institution of the National Development Council to secure national and inter-regional consensus on development program. The NDC has been rightly described as an example of federalism in action. Nehru oriented the country to the socialist path by including the directive principles of state policy in the Constitution. It was at the historic Avadi session of Indian National Congress in 1955 that the Congress gave itself formally the creed of a socialistic pattern of society. The session coincided with the launch of the second five-year plan. From then onwards, vigorous utilization of resources, rapid industrialization, and achieving equitable distribution became the nation's priorities. Nehru has been criticized in the later years for having accorded primacy to the government in economic matters. These policies must be seen, however, in the context of Nehru's time. Capital formation in a society exploited by the foreign rulers for 190 years was a huge task which could not be left to the private sector alone. Planning helped allocate resources, scarce resources, in accordance with the national priorities. The relative merit of a regulated economy was widely accepted at that point of time. Nehru's efforts did not throttle the private initiative. The private sector continued to play an important role. especially in agriculture and small and medium industries. In fact, during the early days of independence, even the private sector supported the idea of a key role for government in creating economic growth and particularly in developing infrastructure. Moreover, many private sector companies received strong support from the public sector financial institutions, enabling them to turn into domestic giants in their respective domain. Nehru's speech at the inauguration of the Bhakranangal Dam still remains in memory as one of the finest ever. I quote, "For me, the temples, the gurdwaras, the churches, the mosques of today are these places where human beings labor for the benefit of other human beings. Of humanity as a whole. They are the temples of today. I feel more, if I may use the word religious minded, when I see these great works than when I see any temple or any place of pure worship. These are the places of worship because here we worship something. We build up India, we build up the millions of India, and so this is a sacred task, unquote. Investment in steel and fertilizer, hydroelectric dams, aluminium smelters had an all-round effect of the economy. Growth rates in agriculture during 1950-65 averaged 2.6%, higher than in the entire first half of the 20th century from 1900 to 1950. As Gopal has summarized Nehru's achievement as follows, I quote, "He consolidated a nation, trained it for democracy, constructed a model for economic development, and set the country on the path of growth." Nehru believed that caste prejudice, religious bigotry, social inequities could be eliminated only by developing a scientific spirit in our social relations and mental habits. Along with scientific achievement, the development of a scientific frame of mind and a scientific habit of thinking was equally important. Science was not only search for truth, but also meant for the benefit of man. A science policy was adopted by the government and scientific laboratories set up across the country. Indian institutes of technology were established to nurture manpower in engineering, frontier disciplines such as space and atomic energy came under the personal supervision of the Prime Minister. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, today we learn to take granted the success of our parliamentary democracy. It must, however, be kept in mind that in many newly independent nations, especially in the post-Second World War era, first-generation nationalist leaders concentrated all power in their own hands and were succeeded by military rulers. It was Jawaharlal Nehru and other founding fathers who ensured that on gaining independence, power was transferred to the people of India through adoption of the constitutions and regular, free and fair elections. At the time of independence, it was widely believed, especially by the skeptics, that India would soon lapse into authoritarianism and the democratic experiment will collapse. India consolidated itself in the difficult formative years of nation building because of the strong and stable system of parliamentary democracy established by Nehru. The challenges that India faced and the importance of her success has been very aptly described by former British Prime Minister Sir Anthony Eden. I quote, "Of all the experiments in government which have been attempted since the beginning of time, I believe that the Indian venture into parliamentary government is the most exciting. A vast subcontinent is attempting to apply to its tens and thousands of millions a system of free democracy. It's a brave thing to try to do so. The Indian venture is not a pale imitation of our practice at home, but a magnificent and multiplied reproduction on a scale we have never dreamt of. If it succeeds, its influence on Asia is incalculable for good. Whatever the outcome, we must honor those who attempted." Unquote. Perhaps proudly we can say today that we have succeeded and we have succeeded. Nehru, when once asked what his legacy to India would be, he replied, "Hopefully, it is 400 million people capable of governing themselves." In the words of S. Gopal, achieved against daunting odds, democracy in India, adult suffrage, sovereign parliament, free press, independent judiciary is Nehru's most lasting monument. His struggle and his achievements were no less than a peak. But it is his deep democratic spirit and practice of a politics vested in the sovereignty of the people that is most precious legacy to us. The manner in which 66.4% of our 834 million strong electorate exercised their voting rights in the recent elections to the 16th Lok Sabha is the best validation of Nehru's efforts in the above regard. Democracy has struck deep roots in India and survived against enormous odds thanks to Nehru's stewardship of the nation in the early years. Every one of our institutions, from the independent judiciary, free press, legislation, and election commission, bear the hallmark of Nehru. Looking ahead, we must renew afresh the imperative of protecting and strengthening our democratic institutions and practice. Imperfect they may be, but they represent the best way forward for our nation as we forge ahead into the 21st century. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude this memorial lecture saluting and paying my humble respects to Johor, the jewel of India. India is what it is today because of Nehru, his vision and his lifetime of dedication to the nation. Let us celebrate his legacy and draw inspiration from his life to take our nation towards greater and greater glory. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Jai Hind.
आप लोग बैठ जाओ भैया।
Sonia ji, Dr. Manmohan Singh, Excellencies, distinguished members of the audience and friends. Thank you, sir, for delivering this very special Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Lecture on the eve of his 125th birth anniversary. In the historic premises of the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, where he lived and labored day and night for 17 years as India's first Prime Minister. Sir, I had the inestimable privilege of getting his guidance and affection for 15 years from 1949 to 1964. His smile, his charisma, his energy is something that anybody who has encountered would never forget. So you have brilliantly highlighted his monumental and multiple contributions to the freedom struggle and to free India, to our polity, our economy, our society, our science and technology, our foreign policy. He left his stamp on almost all aspects of our national life. His unshakable commitment to parliamentary democracy, social harmony, economic growth with justice, free press and independent judiciary, and basic democratic values will always remain a source of inspiration to generations yet unborn, regardless of changing political equations. On behalf of the Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund, the chairperson Srimati Sonia Gandhi and the trustees, I warmly thank you, sir, for your significant address, which I am sure will be warmly appreciated around the nation. Thank you.
अब होगा राष्ट्रीय गान।
जनगण अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जनगण मंगल